Guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is all about advice to males who want to pursue a career in medical coding. If you are brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue. I'm a medical coder. Okay, guys. So, I get this question occasionally. Blue, I'm a male, and medical coding seems like a really great career field. However, it seems like it's very much woman dominated. Is it okay if males pursue medical coding, and will it hinder me from getting a job because I'm a male and I'm trying to get into this industry that is mostly women? No, it will not hinder you from getting a job. And if you are wanting to pursue this, whether you are male or female, whether you're young or old, you shouldn't let those things stop you, like your age or your gender, okay? It has nothing to do with that. Getting in and getting your first job has everything to do with your knowledge. That's what it has everything to do with. And so a lot of times, new coders, doesn't matter what your status is, your first job, finding your first job is a challenge, because a lot of schools pump out medical coders and they don't prepare them for the real world. And they teach them like test taking strategies so they can pass the test and so they can have good scores. But it's not always beneficial to the coder, obviously, because if the coder or the future coder doesn't know how to study on their own, that becomes a problem, and this person is not knowledgeable enough to get into the industry. That's the problem. It has nothing to do with anything else other than that, your knowledge. That's a big thing. That's why I tell new coders to go ahead and apply anyway. If they've been studying, they will be just fine. But if you haven't been studying, that's when you'll see that it's an issue. But I did get this message from this viewer that wrote a lot of questions. And so this was one of the questions. It says, why is there a lower percentage of men in the medical coding profession? My research indicates that only 13 to 14% of coders in the US are male. I don't think those numbers are correct. In fact, it's a little bit higher than that. But when it comes to why is there a lower percentage, I can't really answer that. I think certain professions appeal to certain genders more than they do others. Maybe that's what it was. With medical coding, a lot of it, of course, is reading and, paying attention to detail and that kind of thing. And so, but again, it really all depends on the individual. And if it's something that they want to pursue, then obviously they're going to pursue that. It's just like nursing. I think back to nurses. For the longest time, it was all women. Then men started to join into nursing. I can name 10 nurses that I know personally off the top of my head. That's a lot of male nurses. But when you think about it, the more an industry gets balanced out with, a diverse amount of people and, gender-wise as well, it becomes a lot more, I think it becomes like a fuller view, because every single person offers their different perspectives. And when you have a good balance in a department of both men and women, and they have their different view and way of looking at things and their way of responding to things, I think that makes a department more it's just a better culture environment for that department, because again, there's not a perspective that's going to be missed. All perspectives are going to be represented and looked at. So that's just something that is my own opinion anyway. But I do know that there are more male medical coders coming into the industry. I have always, if you look back to my videos, I have always encouraged males to get into medical coding if that's what they want to do. They should not let the fact that it is this career field is dominated by women. You shouldn't let that stop you from wanting to pursue this, because it is a really great field. And sometimes with some doctors and some providers, they just communicate better, depending on that person. And so again, this is where I go back to talking about the different perspectives. Sometimes a doctor will talk with a woman, but because it's, a male doctor and a female coder, sometimes they don't feel as comfortable. They feel like they have to Okay, I don't know how to say this. And if it's a male talking to another male, then they're a little bit more relaxed, and then they can ask them questions and things like that, and they don't have to really kind of think about how they should say it. Obviously, they're going to be professional, but it's just one of those things that I would say sometimes it's a little bit more easier. It's like when you go to your own private doctor. There are some doctors for women that you want to deal with other women. You do not want to deal with a male doctor, you know? So it's the same way. It's the same thing for men. There are some things that males have to take care of that they do not want a woman to manage them. They would rather have a male manage them. So again, it's just the thing with human beings. You know, it's whoever we're more comfortable with. And sometimes male doctors are more comfortable talking to other males. And so they don't really know how to say things or how to ask or, you know, feel comfortable and things like that. I'm not saying that's the case at all times. I'm just saying that it still does happen. You know, everybody is brought up in different environments. And every time I make this type of video, I always get kind of a little bit of pushback on this one too, because I will have women who will say that in their country that it's just all men who are doing the medical coding. And I've seen that on some of the job postings on LinkedIn. It says males only for medical coding, and that's in their country because that's what they do and that's their culture over there. That's not here. This is the US. This is land of the free, home of the brave, right? And so we welcome everybody to do whatever it is that they want to do, right? And just different countries have different rules. I have no say in that. You know, I have no say in what that means and why they do what they do. That's on their country to explain that. I can't explain it, you know. And different countries have different rules about coders as well. Like in the Philippines, you have to have a nursing degree before you can get into coding. So that means that their coders are already advanced with their anatomy knowledge, pathophysiology, pharma, and all that. So they have a really good foundation, you know, the coders from the Philippines. So that's just something to think about when you're thinking about all these things. I don't have all of the answers to these questions. And I can't answer this question of why there's more women than there is men in this industry and why it's so little. I can't explain it. All I can do is just tell you what I've said from the beginning of my channel is that everybody is welcome in medical coding. The things that medical coders need to have that is not age-based or gender-based or any of those things is the ability to be able to read and comprehend English and to be able to look at a document and figure out the codes and find out what's there, and if something needs to be queried, the ability to be able to write a very well-written query to a provider that is not leading the provider, but rather it is conveying that you need clarity in whatever it is that needs to be cleared up when you're trying to get the codes for this particular encounter or stay. So that's the thing that we're looking at in coding, you know. Again, to really kind of like say, oh, it's just because I'm a male and I don't want to pursue it because of that and it's working around too many women. I mean, you would be nervous working around anybody new, okay? So it's until you get to know people. So you have to be able to give them a chance and not just count them out because you immediately think that they're not going to welcome you because you're going to be the only male, right? You can't really do that. I mean, it may be a little nerve-wracking at first because, again, you don't know these people. These people are new. But that's going to be in anything that you do. That's not just in coding. That is if you were in any other profession and you're learning and getting to know those folks as well. You know, it's all about getting to know people. And again, the bad thing about the socialization of people nowadays, everything is electronic and it's online and it's text and things like that and messages and things. And so it's really hard when I'm trying to tell people to get out there and to socialize because we still need our social skills. People get so worked up and wrapped up in their head of like, oh no, I get really nervous and I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. Just greeting the person that is working with you, like if you're at the store, You see the cashier, hello, how are you, that kind of thing. You don't have to ask them their whole life story, but that's just basic socialization skills. And learning to work with people like that is a good first step, you know. That's just the only thing that I'm saying, you know, when it comes to those types of things. But like I said, to explain other people's countries and why there's more male coders over there, I can't explain it. I can't even explain why there's more women here that do medical coding, okay? I don't even look at that. All I look at is the person's intelligence. That's what I'm looking at. But it's the same thing that could be said about people that are older, that their boss is young enough to be their kid. Some people have a hard time with that. They have a hard time with somebody younger telling them what to do, but it's not that. That is their position as their supervisor, to instruct them on what to do, to lead them and things like that. So again, that goes back to all of that. And it's the same thing if, you know, you're thinking about, like, you're preoccupying your mind with all these things that don't really matter. Like, I'm worried about my gender, I'm worried about my age, and I'm worried about all these other people. Believe it or not, these other people are not even thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves. And so if you are paying attention to why you're there and what is your purpose for being there, that, trust me, is going to be a complete game changer. It is very challenging sometimes because I've worked around so many women. There's a lot of different personalities. And when I worked in a tin can, I call it a tin can of a room, because there was 20 of us, like sardines, in one big room. And we were all working in bullpens. So it's like cubicle city, basically. And so if one person came in and they were having a bad day, everybody knew about it. And so if they wanted to be distracted and not work that day, that's exactly what they were going to do. Now, I'm just saying this as an example. Don't think this is something that always happens, because there's been other people who have worked in big rooms before too, and they said that they were not allowed to talk because, you know, if you talk and then some people get carried away and then they start distracting their neighbors and then they can't work. So that's why in some places they have a no talking rule. But that's not always the case. Don't let that, you know, scare you away. I'm just saying an example. And so working around all these women, it gets catty. I mean, that's just the way that it is, you know. But that's anything, okay? Because I've worked around a lot of men, and trust me, it gets catty with men too. So, you know, it can go either way. But what I'm saying is this: when it started to get to me, it started to get to be too much, because I am no drama. I do not want drama. Stay away from me, drama. I will do anything and everything I can to just, it's not for me. Okay, I don't get all wrapped up in all that craziness. Leave me out of it, okay? But when it started to get to be too much, where you're hearing things like from other people and there's a lot of gossip and things like that, when I started to remove myself as far as, like, why am I going to work? I am going to work to help my providers and to help the patients in my own way. Help the patients, because we don't have any interaction with patients at all, okay? Let me just make that clear. We have no interaction with patients. However, what we do as coders does affect them, because if we are selecting the correct code, then that means that patient's going to be able to pay the correct amount. If we are selecting the incorrect code, whether we're coding too high or too low, that's going to affect what they pay. And what they pay affects that provider, because if they're not being paid accurately, well, of course, the whole thing falls apart. So that's why I say I look at the documentation to make sure the documentation has everything it needs. If there's anything that's missing, then I'm going to query that provider. I'm going to educate that provider. I'm going to make sure that I spend time with them specifically about that, because when that patient takes that record and goes to another provider, that provider better be able to look at that document and say, well, this patient had this done, this done, this done, this done. There should be no question about the treatment that that patient had from a provider that I'm coding for. Because if there is a question about what happened here, I don't even know what happened or what they did, or, you know, what did they do here for this patient, If that's the case, then I have failed as a coder because I did not catch that provider giving out barely any information, or information that was very vague, that another provider is going to have to redo all of these tests again, or have to ask or find out or do some detective work to find out what kind of procedures this patient had. That should not be. It should be that that document is going to be clear enough so that the provider knows, right? And because you never know, anything could happen with that provider. They may have to go on emergency leave, and they may have to, leave the practice in somebody else's hands. And that next person is going to have to pick up that documentation and be like, okay, well, what happened here? The best way to avoid that is to make sure that all of that stuff is clear. Now, I say all this to say that once I started to ignore all the drama that was going on in the office with the girls, and I started focusing on the reason that I was there, which was the patients and the providers, trust me, my whole world got a lot better. I started to have a pep in my step, because it wasn't just like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen today? It was, I get to work with my providers, and I get to see what they're doing, and I can focus on whoever needs the attention at the time. Because maybe I get a new provider, or maybe I get a provider who went to a conference and heard something from a buddy of theirs that was incorrect, and I have to go and I have to correct them. So once you start focusing on things that you need to focus on, all of that drama and everything else will be small fries, and you won't even have to think about it after a while, because you'll be so focused on what you need to focus on. Too many people are getting focused on the things that they don't need to be focused on: age, gender, drama, all these other things that don't even matter at the end of the day. What matters, and why coders need to focus, is for their providers and for the patients. That's why we need to focus, not on anything else. Because if you get all sucked up into that drama, it just takes away the joy of doing the coding. And to me, I get so excited when it comes to the coding because I'm a nerd. This is naturally what I am. But looking at this documentation and making sure that it's good, that's why my focus is there, And when I come here and I encourage you guys that if this is what you want to do, that you should go ahead and pursue it. And I'm not going to sit here and try to convince people, okay? I will tell you, I will encourage you, but I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you that this is something that you should do. That's a decision that you have to make. That's a decision that only you can be able to come to, as far as like, do I want to do this? Do I want to invest the time? Do I want to invest the time in a career that is going to give me an intellectual challenge, that is going to keep me engaged? There's a lot of, oh, well, that's too hard, it's too hard, and I want something easier. You're going to get bored, because that's just the human nature of it all, is if you do something redundant for a long time, you're going to get bored. Your brain starts to look for other stimulation somewhere else. And then by the time you know it, you're on autopilot. And some people say, well, Blue, I just need to work right now, and then when I retire, then I'll be able to do whatever it is I want to do. And then when they retire, then they're just like, man, I didn't invest in myself. I didn't invest in skills so that I can do whatever it is I want to do in retirement. Okay? So that's just something else that you guys have to think about. When it comes to what you want to focus on, that's going to put a lot of your emphasis, a lot of your energy emphasis on something. And if you are focusing on the right things, then you are going to do things that's going to make you feel alive and engaged. Not all worried about silly things like age and gender and all of these things. Well, Blue, people are going to discriminate against me because I'm older. There's laws to protect you from that. Okay? There's laws to protect you from that. Same thing with if you're preoccupied with this gender thing. I mean, again, there's laws to protect you. It's about your competency. It is about your abilities to be able to do the job. That's what it's about. It's not about any of these other things. So quit worrying about things those things don't matter. And start focusing and putting your energy on learning things so that you can, when you walk in, you're going to be confident in what you know. As far as like the guidelines, you don't have to memorize them, but you need to have read them enough that it's going to be second nature to you. Sometimes now I surprise myself, because as many times as I go through those guidelines and somebody will tell me something, I say, well, that's in the guidelines. I won't know the exact quote of the location, but I know exactly where to go in order to find that answer, because I've gone through those guidelines so many times. And you can get like that too, regardless of if you're brand new to the industry or you've been in for a while. Anybody can have that ability just by going through the guidelines. But that also means that you have to get more disciplined. And again, an undisciplined mind is going to be worried about all these things that don't matter, but a disciplined mind is going to think and focus on the things that do matter, like building knowledge, building skill, and building their own personal arsenal of skill, as far as like socialization skills, and when they're talking, speaking, and thinking about what they want to say and saying what they mean. Okay, because a lot of times people will say things like, oh, well, I didn't mean it like that, or I didn't mean this, or I didn't mean that. I have heard a lot of people say, well, I don't know how to express myself. I don't understand that. I understand not knowing how to find the words, but I don't understand how you can say you don't know how to express yourself. Okay, and I know I'm going down another rabbit hole here, but it really does all tie together, because again, when you think about, like, if you clearly want something, you want a new career, you want a challenge, you want this career, but then you start thinking about all these other things that don't matter. And instead of just kind of being in control and quieting those things that don't matter, and really start focusing on, okay, well, what do I have to do to be the best coder I can be? And after a while, learning and doing those things, you'll be able to express yourself well, and you'll be able to say what you mean. Because people who scramble around and think and can't express themselves is because they don't know about the topic, they don't know about the subject, they don't know about the field. But then when you start learning about it and you spend your time with it, it makes it a lot easier for you to express yourself. I'm just saying, you know. So, but yes, that's what I would say. If you want to do it, go for it, whether you're male or female, whether you're young or old. Don't let that get in your way, especially that, because everybody has their gifts, whether it is, you know, that you are very meticulous in one way, and maybe somebody else isn't, right? But you are. And when my mom and I delivered phone books, this is the difference, okay? Like I said, delivering phone books was very much a male-dominated industry. There was very few of us women in that industry. But when it came to special assignments that needed to be done, and needed to be done in a way that was really good and accurate and correct, and it was not going to be all over the place, they always called in me and my mom. And because they said that, you know, anytime it was any of the executives that they had to have their books delivered and things, they wanted it done correctly. And my mom was the number one for that because that's just the way that she was. Very, very, she took a lot of pride in her work. And that's what I got from her. And so, because you have two of us doing this, and that was the best. That was the best for that industry, and that was the best for that time. And so it's the same thing now, if you're going to be thinking of it that way. You know, somebody who is coming in with a different point of view, like I said, men and women have different points of view, and maybe the way that this particular woman in the industry has been looking at certain things, maybe if a male colleague comes along and says, okay, well, what about this? It gives a different perspective, a different point of view. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing to have that. So like I said, everybody brings their gifts, and everybody brings their different perspectives. And that's what you have to look at it as. And quit looking at it like, oh, there's all these women. So, like, you can't go in there and work too. You know, that's the thing, you know. But whatever you decide, you have to decide to do something that's right for you. Okay, but start focusing on the right things, because if you're always going to be looking for little things like that about how it won't work or why it won't work, and saying, oh, well, I heard from people who are not in the industry, or people who don't know, or people who are not telling you the full story. Because sometimes when people can't get hired, their first job in coding, it is because either they can't pass a background check, they can't pass a tinkle test, and they're not telling you that. And then now you're listening to somebody who can't pass a tinkle test, knowing full freaking well you have to be able to pass a tinkle test, knowing full well you have to be able to pass a background check, and they're still running around saying, well, if I can't get hired, I'm going to discourage somebody else. And then you're listening to somebody that's doing that, that's trying to steal your future, and you're going to let them? Again, it goes back to the same thing of worrying about gender. Why? Men have just as much gifts to give as women do when it comes to perspectives in this field. I'm just saying, okay? So with that said, I'm going to leave it there. Focus on what you need to focus on, which is the studies, instead of worrying about all these other things. And if you're in school right now and you're thinking, oh, well, what about when I go to find a job? I heard I can't find a job. I heard it's really hard to find a job. Have you even got your certification yet? Oh, what did you say? No? Okay, then go back to studying and focus on that. Don't be worried about something that you're not there yet. It will come. All of that worry will come at that time when it's appropriate. But right now, you need to be building your skill and your knowledge base. That's what you need to do. Because trust me, that's a full-time job in itself. But with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you guys so much for joining me. If this video helped you, please like, subscribe, and share. And I will see y'all next time. Bye.